Hi, I'm going to read to you a few pages from the Leeway Towers. It's a science fiction story about population control at core, based in a small island named the Isle of Flora and its capital Lear, situated in the Indian Ocean. During the first part, Carl, the protagonist, is a schoolboy, and the story explores the problems building up in various pockets of the island until the place finally descends into civil war. In the second part, Carl returns after many years of being a refugee and finds his hometown entirely transformed. But there's something unnatural about the order that he encounters. He learns that the population of Lear is kept docile with the help of transmission towers that beam low frequency waves. He finds himself in league with a band of vigilantes who watch over the place, waiting for the right time to act. Chapter 40, page 314. Carl sat and watched the older man tilt the kettle with his steady right hand, touching the holding arm's elbow with his other as if on ceremony. They dragged their saucers to comfortable positions and took the first sips amidst a few minutes of silence. "How do you control people, Carl?" Carl was stumped by the sudden change in gear and the wide scope of the question. He said, squinting in thought. "I wonder. Perhaps you control their minds in some way, the way they think." People think that controlling a mind is purely cerebral matter, but this doesn't account for the fact that humans are inherently directed by emotion and feeling. We could get machines to calculate vast things, but this hasn't made these things alive. The idea of highly intelligent and evolved life as being somewhat devoid of emotion is a false notion. It's why there's such widespread misconception regarding machines spontaneously coming alive. On the contrary, the complexity of human emotion is very much part of our advancement. We are creatures of emotional response. At the end of the day, what distinguishes humans from machines isn't the ability to calculate, but the ability to feel things. It sounded rehearsed, but more noteworthy, thought Carl, was the fact that he thought about similar things the night before, as if it was some sort of premonition. You're saying that the way to control people is to influence the way they feel, the way they emote and feel. Yes. And then what they think falls into place. He paused as he sipped. Placing a thought in someone's head artificially is rather complicated. It requires the right sort of sentence structure and that people actually understand what you're saying. And the person will still perceive it via some sort of language. This can all be done in ways that have been around for ages. And let's just say we put in a simple message into someone's head, something like, "Don't litter" or "Be kind." There's no real motivation for people to comply with this. Simply placing text in front of someone communicates the message as well. Putting the thought in someone's head is simple. It requires direct communication. But it does not mean that they will actually behave in that way. Okay. At core, given enough information, most humans can gauge whether their actions are appropriate. One could at least say that most of us intuitively know whether the thing we are doing leans towards right or wrong. Right or wrong may be simplistic, but let's put it on a scale of moral acceptability, considering norms, the way we have evolved, and generally having an understanding of the way other organisms feel. You think humans naturally have a moral compass? Yes, regular humans do, unless deeply indoctrinated into a problematic ideology. People understand if their actions are harmful or useful. Let's assume that they know that they should be kind to others and not litter. They have the thought and they have the knowledge that It all adds up to conditions that are not appropriate for living harmoniously with the environment. To cheat, to steal, to hurt, to dirty, all these things can be clearly understood as morally reprehensible. And but who defines these? Stay with me a moment. Rishi sipped. This works not by placing thoughts in people's heads, by some voice of God method. As far as I know, such technology has not been invented. And you'd still have to put the thought in via some channel of sense. Audible words, most likely. As for telepathically placing a thought in someone's head, well, I'm sure people can get instructions like that, but I'm not sure they're entirely forthcoming or sane. And coming to practicality, having voices ring in people's heads would also puzzle them. A lot of people might even think that they're going crazy. It's not a safe thing to do, even if it was possible. Said Carl, nodding. What defines life is not just that it can think, which by no means is an ordinary feat, but if you look at nature, the thing that makes things alive and intelligent in the sense of being self-serving, self-preserving, self-propagating, is emotional impulse. The cognition is guided by the emotion. Get people to feel in certain ways, and you can get them to behave in certain ways as well. Rishi sipped. Consider, for instance, a situation where there is compelling reason to not do something. Now split that reality into two. On the one hand, there's the thought that you should avoid throwing a plastic bag out of a car. This may compel some to behave in a responsible manner, but for most, only a distinct feeling of shame and sadness will be motivating enough. And thought has to be accompanied by that feeling, because the thought lacks the moral compass to really bother. You have to move people and make them emotionally entangled with their actions. Once there is that emotional movement, it is easier to make them behave in certain ways. Adhere to ideology, willingness to engage in conflict, acting on desire, all these and much more indicate that emotional content of a person is central to understanding the manner in which they behave. The message may be simple. The complex bit is to get people to emote. Carl looked into the distance while absorbing this. You're telling me that people are being controlled in some way like this, in some way that involves the way they feel? The simple answer is yes, which brings us to the next stage. How? How? Transmissions. Transmissions? Yes. Hold on, you're telling me that people are behaving a certain way in Lear because of transmissions? Said Carl, squinting. It isn't simplistic or some sort of one-step process. There are various aspects at work here. It's a compounded action that is required to control people. But I'll start with what we've got here as the central element. Waves. Waves? Waves have impact on life, on mood, on the way we feel. And there's plenty of waves going around in Lear. Waves, said Carl, his mouth gaping with surprise. Low-frequency waves associated with relaxed, meditative states of mind. Okay, said Carl, staring at his cup. Not sure if the old chap was a madman. But what do you mean there are waves going around? Lear is quite simply bathed in these waves. How? Did you ever notice the towers while you were there? Towers? Yeah, the thin, tall, grey ones made of steel. Carl thought about this a moment. I'd sat before one. I remember staring up at it. I thought it's a transmission tower. I never gave it much thought. Nobody gives it much thought. And this makes people feel relaxed? Yeah. And this is useful? Strange, huh? I'm trying to imagine the use. Content people have lesser demands. Hold on, this sounds a little crazy. It's just science. You beam a frequency of about 10 hertz and there you have it. Have what? Sounds straightforward, doesn't it? All this sounds rather crazy, you realize. What's crazier than war? Hold on, you're telling me that there are towers in place all over Lear that make the people docile and the people are somehow okay with this? Few people know. And it's done during the day, it starts in the morning, and it's stopped in the evening. It would spoil sleep if it went on all the time. Okay, said Carl, wide-eyed, quite sure he'd just been initiated into a crazy cult now. Alright, thanks for your time.